This is a Headgum podcast.
Hello, this is Fake the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about culture, and where we grapple with the question man versus bear. Yeah, we're going to get into it in a second. I'm your host, Negin Farsad, and I had a hard time answering man versus bear. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because, like me, you weren't sure what was happening on the internet the last couple of weeks, but apparently that's what's been happening on the internet. I'll explain in a moment. Today, we're going to officially talk about mixed relationships when it comes to cleanliness. We'll talk about the eldest daughter syndrome. We'll dip into a wide-ranging political discussion with some MTG, some Bernie, some Stormy, and finally, radical honesty. Is it as horrible as it sounds? Today, folks, we're doing a twofer. We're doing a me and a panelist. And you might not even call it a panel in that case, but I'm still referring to it as a panel. This week's panel of one is, he's a veteran to the show. This is one of those panels where I'm like, oh, yeah, could me and this guy fucking do an entire show together? Obviously, because he's such an excellent talker. He has incredible insights. He also, folks, has 5 albums on iTunes. Five albums on iTunes. He's incredibly prolific. His latest special is Show Your Work. You can find it on Amazon. And one of my favorite things that he's done recently is a Substack called New Music for Olds. You can actually get that at newmusicforolds.substack.com. And I know a few of our listeners have really gotten into it. It is the one and only Christian Finnegan. Hey,
Hi,
Christian.
Negin. Oh, what a pleasure. What a nice intro. I feel so.
It
feels like you were
intro.
introing for 2. Like it felt it was double the intro.
I have to. I can't help myself. It's a panel. It's a panel of 2, and the intro has to be for 2.
That's right.
But also, you are incredibly prolific gentleman, and I feel like the people should know. Here's the deal. If you enjoy the show, I think you should go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad to support the show. Thanks to everybody who does, because for as little as $4 a month, you get extra bonus, both of those words are the same, episodes of the show. With that different tiers, you get different things. And oh my God, it's where we deal with some of the ethical questions, some of the weirder questions, where we really let our hair down. So
how much do I have to spend a month to get the extra bonus surplus package?
You know what? $4 is gonna get you 5. There's also a $5 tier, which I think is the extra bonus surplus, really, if we want to get technical. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. All right, let's get into it with topic number 1. Now listen, the topic in culture, apparently, and I was just alerted about this by Coffee Crew, shout out Coffee Crew in the East Village, is apparently man versus bear. And the question is, if you're a woman and you're in a forest or whatever, would you rather you approach a strange man or a strange bear? Now, Christian, I don't know if you've been privy to this discussion online, but what do you think has been the pervasive answer?
Well, first of all, among certain communities, man and the bear could be one and the same. Yes.
True.
From what I understand, it is sort of a thought experiment where women answer the question, would they rather be trapped in the woods alone with a man or a bear?
Right.
And the vast majority will say a bear, and I don't blame them whatsoever. I'm a man, and I would rather be trapped in the woods with a bear than a man. Bears don't really want any part of you.
Well, what about the eating part of it?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. I guess if you're asking me, would I rather be trapped in a sort of glass cube with a man or a bear, maybe it might be a different discussion. But if we're just out in the woods where the bear has its own den and it has its own, salmon and whatever, then, especially black bears, which are smaller, like they don't want anything to, like, we have bears up in our, we have a little cabin in upstate New York, and there are black bears, and they're chickens. They're chicken shit. They run away the minute you open the door. They're not hostile creatures unless you go after their young or you trap them, or you get the corner them.
Okay,
whereas dudes are dudes.
Dudes are dudes. And some of my best husbands are dudes. You know what I mean? And so I love a dude. I gotta be honest. However, I do see, I think because of just the history of the universe, the dude can, I guess as a woman, I would say bear is probably just like an easier fix, because now, you've dealt with bears. I've been told by who knows who that when you see a bear, you're supposed to sing really loud at them, um, like like musicals, and then they run.
Specifically, Merrily We Roll Along. They
Merrily We
prefer.
Roll Along, but you wouldn't do Into the Woods because that would be too on the nose.
Oh,
You would. So stupid.
That was so dumb.
That was so dumb. So sorry, ladies and gentlemen, and that is the end of the podcast. No, but I heard that if you get real loud and big and ridiculous, then the bear, it goes away.
I guess true? I have heard that too, that you want to look. I mean, that's why you always see that sort of classic image of the bear standing up with its arms raised wide, because I think it's sort of an optical illusion that, makes itself look bigger than it is, which honestly, it also works on cats. If you ever have like, a cat that's like, violent or hissing, if you do that sort of same, sometimes if you hold a blanket up in front of you, like, it makes you look, they don't have any sort of
understanding that that's not your body.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think that is part of it. And obviously, again, different bears are different. That's my favorite name of my favorite children's book.
Also hashtag not all bears.
Not all. You know what? So often I've been bear pilled.
Okay, so I guess from the two of us, you're not going to hear. No, if you had to choose between man and bear, you would choose.
I mean,
who?
It depends what kind of man. Like,
no, of course.
Are we talking about?
But it's
like
an unknown man, so it's either it could be it could be Tom Hanks, or it could be Stephen Miller. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know who.
Right, or it could just be like a dude who's like super into like Imagine Dragons or something. Like, it could be just some intolerable dude who's like, wicked into DJ Khaled. Or DJ Khaled. Like, I would take a bear over DJ Khaled. Absolutely.
You think he would just be too much?
It would probably take me a few moments to distinguish between the two. But
he's a big guy.
He's a big hairy dude.
All right, so folks, let us know, where are you on this issue? If you're a man, I want to know where you stand, and if you're a woman, I want to know where you stand. Apparently, the women's of the internet stand with bear.
And I'm sorry, but before we move on, just like, guys will look, everybody on the internet, I won't say guys, people on the internet will look for an excuse to feel maligned or slighted, or, any man who says they don't understand that reaction is a liar and potentially a massive red flag. Any guy who says like, how dare, women, or this is what's the word that they use, the opposite of misogyny?
What is that word?
They use it all the time, the dumb MRAs.
Anyways,
misandry. They'll claim misandry. It's like, come on, man. If you've been alive, even if you've been aware of your own thoughts, you know what the right answer to that thought experiment is. Like, I'm pretty much probably the least dangerous dude in the, I'm probably in the lower tier of sort of dangerous straight dudes.
Agreed.
And I know my own brain. Pick the bear, ladies.
All right, folks, you heard it from Christian Finnegan, the least dangerous of the straight dudes himself. Pick the bear. Okay, so let's quickly move on to this next issue, which is the eldest daughter syndrome. That was also something that was taking over the internet this week. The eldest daughter syndrome is a sibling with an intense feeling, who is the eldest daughter, and who has an intense feeling of responsibility towards the family. Maybe they're a people pleaser. Maybe they have resentment towards the siblings and parents because they feel like they have to do more. So we could talk about eldest daughter syndrome, but in general, I wanted to talk about birth order. I don't know where you are in the birth order, or if you have, or if you're an only child, but has birth order affected you in life?
I don't know. My experience, I guess, is slightly atypical. I mean, I don't know if there is typical when it comes to this stuff, but I was a middle child, but I only became a middle child when I was 8. My older brother was 2 years older, and my younger brother was 8 years younger.
Wait, your older brother is 2 years older than your younger brother's 8 years younger.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Okay.
Yeah. But they have both passed. So now I'm an only child. But when I was younger, yeah, it's not dramatic. I don't, but totally fine to talk about. But so I do think that maybe I absorbed some of that middle child stuff, but it was really only in high school that I started to sort of have those typical I'm being ignored, no one notices me kind of thing. First of all, because my younger brother was very sick growing up. And so like all of the family focus was on him.
On that, yeah.
And my older brother, you know, I still think in many ways that he and I were a unit, and then my younger brother was like something different, you know, because he was 8 years removed.
Yeah.
So I think we both kind of shared the responsibility of, you know, the older child in terms of babysitting and changing diapers and things like that. But I'm sure that my older brother probably felt, I actually think he felt more ignored than I did in a way. I don't know. I mean, I think these things are very understandable. When you're the oldest child, you are going to be the first line of assistance when it comes to another child. And so of course you're going to grow up with certain feelings of responsibility and resentment. I don't blame an oldest child for that at all. I don't think it's any deep psychological wound. I think it's just different roles come with different responsibilities.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Christian. You know, it's interesting because I'm the youngest of two, but my brother's 13 years older, and our lives were radically different. Like he immigrated from Iran. Like I just grew up in Palm Springs, California. You know what I mean? Like our lives
you're an American
couldn't
kid.
be. Yeah, and I'm a just American kid. I didn't have to learn about it. I just was that, and so our lives were so different. And I think the interesting thing is, in terms of like feeling duty and responsibility, I mean, you know, my brother would probably characterize it differently, but I feel like I have a stronger feeling of that, and that might be more gendered. Like I just think I feel like, you know, like I'm the one that's always like, it's Mother's Day, don't forget, you know what I mean, like adding his name onto a gift or whatever. Like I just like you know, I think about those things more. I feel more of a duty about those things. I feel, you know, I feel more guilt about those things. And I just think that might just be like a gendered thing, even though I'm the youngest daughter.
I definitely agree that it is a gendered thing. And this is again where it's like, on the one hand, my first instinct is to sort of slam guys because I know how just dopey we are about stuff like that and how little attention many men pay to things like birthdays stuff and like Mother's Day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't care as much. Like we're not as offended as much if those things fall through the cracks because you know what I mean? And so I do think that that is probably more a gendered thing than a birth order thing.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great time for me to announce it is Mother's Day on Sunday.
Oh God! Oh sure. Oh.
Don't
I gotta
fucking forget about your goddamn moms. God damn it. Well, I do want to mention that firstborn children, there's like not very much science on this even. So like the idea of eldest daughter syndrome, whatever, all that stuff is basically like you know, hooey. A 2015 study that looked at more than 20,000 people in Germany and the United Kingdom and the United States, randomly those three countries, found no link between birth order and personality characteristics, although, and this is where I suffer, there is a slight IQ advantage to the older child, which is annoying. And why would that be the case? Does like the womb deteriorate for the second one and creates like a fucking worse brain? Like,
I got this used womb to work with.
So the secondhand womb is making you know, less smart kids. And then one therapist pointed out something that I thought was kind of like interesting. They said, I think this is from an article in the Times. They said, I think people are just looking for meaning and self-understanding. And part of me just thinks, like when they talk about birth order, they're just like, oh, you know, as the oldest child, I've always felt this or that or whatever. And the therapists see this a lot. And I think I started to get annoyed because I was just like, oh, do we have to fucking have do we need to like have some sort of like therapy containment device for fucking everything? Can't it just be you're like the more responsible one in the family and the other person isn't? Like, it, you know what I mean?
I didn't want to interrupt you there, but I so 100% agree with you about that everything needs to be pathologized and everything needs to be separated into like, I am this type of person. Everything is now a Myers-Briggs, or,
Yes.
everything has to be separated. Like, this is my special group of no one can understand me. It's obviously horoscopes are kind of the obvious example, but everything now is like, well, as a junior high lacrosse player, I have a certain, everybody has to, and a lot of this is, there's good things about this and bad things about it. It's wonderful that social media and the web, the internet, has sort of allowed people who are part of legitimately specific communities to find each other and to sort of share understanding. But I think that a lot of us who aren't really part of those idiosyncratic groups feel an urge to be a part of them.
Yes.
That we all want to feel like that we have some little group. There's something special about me. The term snowflake, which is used against liberals all the time and overused. Originally, what it meant, it's kind of come to mean like, oh, you're like soft and you can't, you can't handle things. Originally, when the word snowflake was being thrown around, it was to describe people who thought that they were so unique and so specific that they were unlike anybody else, that they were special in some way and had to be understood, like in a way
fact how you learn about it, like in kindergarten.
Yes, exactly. That's what you learn about snowflakes. And I do think that there is just this urge of everyone to kind of feel like, well, where's my little group of people? What's my little defining trait that nobody can understand,
And in closing, folks, no one is special and we're all super basic.
We're all headed into the same void, people. So
birth order or not. All right, folks, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue chatting. And we are back, and we're ready for topic number 2. So here's the deal. Bernie Sanders is running for re-election for the Senate seat of Vermont that he has been occupying these last 3 terms. He is the ripe old age of 82. And there's a lot of discussion about age in this election. I wonder, Christian, does that discussion extend to Bernie Sanders?
It is funny to see a lot of people who ordinarily would be taking pot shots at Biden kind of have no issue that I've seen with this, considering he is 2 years older and a Senate term is 2 years longer.
Yeah.
You're talking about a guy being 88 or 90 or 88 to 89 by the time he finished his term. And I don't know. Part of me feels like, would there even be any expectation whatsoever that he would finish that term? But arguing the opposite, I'll argue with myself here. Being a senator is a lot more replaceable than being a president. So is it as, the stakes aren't quite as high. But I think it's because Bernie has just seemed old
since
from the minute we all met him. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? For the last 30
true.
years.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of almost like this fixed and amber quality that he has. He's been the same old guy for so long that he almost seems immortal.
Yeah, it's like those actors that have like 50-year-long careers where they're always playing an older guy or whatever. Like, and I wish I could name one right now.
Well, like Wilford Brimley, there's that the
like
Wilford Brimley line. Have you heard of that?
No, what is it?
The Wilford Brimley line is when certain actors pass the age that Wilford Brimley was when he was in Cocoon. Which was like 54, by the way. It was like super young.
Up, he was
but
that young.
Yeah, and so they'll be like, Tom Cruise has passed the Wilford Brimley line. Like all these actors who we think of as being sort of young-ish, still leading man types are like way older than he was when he was in Cocoon because he just always looked like an old dude.
Yeah, and I think that's Bernie Sanders has that Wilford Brimley quality of just like he has always been an old dude. He's also always been feisty, and I think. And it's funny because Biden has sort of never been that. He's been, I think, like feisty with policy and all that stuff. And
right.
But I think in terms of just like sheer being the way he talks and his like physicality, he's never really quite been like Bernie. And he's never
Bernie's
quite
kind of
worn.
cantankerous and sort of iconoclastic and all those
Yeah,
things, which, yeah.
exactly, which has worked to his benefit. I mean, it's part of like his charm and what, what drew people to him, that and the mittens, and maybe if Biden had just fucking worn some more mittens,
If
people would be
only.
less fixated on his age.
Well, and
Okay,
also, I
so
mean, just sorry to interrupt, but the fact that Bernie hasn't gotten fillers and fruit peels and all these things, and he looks like an old person should look, and there's something kind of calming about that he looks. Whereas I think Biden, it's almost like a physical version of the Streisand effect, where it's like the more work he gets done to sort of preserve a semi-youthful look,
yeah, the
the
older he
weirder
looks.
he and the older he looks, and
Yeah.
it's genuinely kind of unsettling now.
Well, and that's actually the argument I've made about all of the like Gen Z and like younger millennials who get a ton of like face stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They end up kind of looking like housewives in their 50s
Yeah.
because they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, they all look like the same housewife in her 50s.
They all look like the same housewife. So I'm always like, guys, don't like get it until like you really have to, because you're gonna just transform your face into this thing that we all consider like older. So there's the Bernie Sanders note. Now let's quickly talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, originally, what was the reason why we were going to talk about this was because she was going to put up for a vote removing Speaker Mike Johnson. And she was the only one. Like, nobody was on board with this, but she had said, we're absolutely going to vote on this. And of course, she backpedaled yesterday, and they're absolutely not going to vote on it because she's also like, Speaker Johnson and I have had some meetings or whatever, and I don't know, we're going to talk it out. But here's my question. This feels like a moment where, like, we're going to look back at this week and be like, oh, that was the beginning of the end of the Freedom Caucus's power. I mean, I'm making the craziest large statement, but okay, go with me for a second. It feels like the beginning of the end of that kind of power because no one got on board. It was like the moment before when Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the crazies would just like be like, we're gonna do something nuts and like just upend everything, like and a lot of people did it. Like, that seems to be, everyone's like, guys, can we not do that again? Like, it actually sucks. And it was a bipartisan feeling that it actually sucks. So do you feel, I mean, are you joining me in this feeling, or am I going too far?
I feel like I've been burned by that feeling before, and like I kind of thought when they couldn't elect a speaker to replace McCarthy that it's like, oh, this is the end. I think what you're seeing to a degree is that shameless and stupid has its limitations, that it can take you a far way. Like, I used to do a bit about how it's really hard to win an argument with the stupid person because they're just be like, like they don't acknowledge logic, and so they just sort of press forward. It's like trying to win an argument with a wild animal or something. And these people, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, they're utterly shameless, and I think it's taken a long time for people to sort of figure out how to fight that. Like, how do you fight someone who has no principles and who has no sort of moral or intellectual gag reflex? And I think that the problem is that people legitimately hated Kevin McCarthy. Like, Republicans, Democrats, they didn't like him. He was a liar and nobody trusted him. And so when there was sort of an uprising, there were enough people who, even if they kind of wouldn't have called a vote on McCarthy themselves, weren't going to fight it so hard because it's like, how can you defend this asshole? Whereas I think Johnson, for, as much of a jackass as he is, has sort of dealt with his own caucus in relatively good faith, and there's a stability there. And also, I think they understand, it's like, this is an election year. We can't do this again in the year of an election. Like,
and it's embarrassing internationally. Like, it's embarrassing, and people are like, why are we're already the least productive Congress. I think they ran the numbers. They are the least productive Congress in the history of the union. So that's already like a knock against them. Like, why add to that like Christ. I think the other interesting thing about Johnson is that he like kind of lacks bluster. I mean, when people asked him about the vote of no confidence from Marjorie Taylor Greene, his response was like, "Oh, bless her heart," which is like it's like a veiled insult, but it's still kind of like calm and fine. Like he just doesn't go out and is not attacking, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying the guy doesn't support policies that I think are abhorrent, but I am saying that he kind of has a little bit more decorum, which I think is something that I have truly and dearly missed from American politics.
Yeah, and the simple fact is that when it comes, in an election year, especially, Congress is not the Senate. Everyone's up, everyone's up for re-election. The House is not like the Senate, rather. You can't kind of like have this crisis in election year and sort of float it because half of your members aren't up for re-election. Like they're all up. And I think that they understand that it's just like the last thing you want to do is just wave a flag saying we're incompetent, in that we are completely not even unproductive, we're anti-productive, and I do think that there was just a general feeling of sit down and shut the fuck up.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, okay, so let's folks.
Well, and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, they don't want to be in the majority anyway.
No.
Their careers are better in the minority. And so they have nothing to lose.
And it also feels like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, doesn't have any friends. She's not actually, if I was a voting person in her district in Georgia, I would wonder to myself what she can actually get done for the district. She doesn't have like from what I can tell, she doesn't have plans for them or like bills for them, or it's not like she's not like doing stuff like for the district, because if you did want to like do significant things, you would actually have to build alliances, which is not something that she prides herself on not building alliances, right? So
no, I think that the sort of idea among the sort of hardcore Marjorie Taylor Greene fans is that when God Emperor Trump is restored to office, they need people like Marjorie Taylor Greene to man the goon squads to run the public executions. You know what I mean? Like I'm only slightly exaggerating that I think that they see her as a completely bought in, sold, warrior for what they believe in, and they need people like her for when Trump returns to power and he needs his lieutenants to, clean things up, so to speak.
Well, speaking of Emperor God Trump, he is on trial. He continues to be on trial. And yesterday, we're taping on Wednesday, Stormy Daniels actually gave her testimony. Now, my understanding of the testimony is that it was like a lot more about like the sex than I think I had personally anticipated. And she, for example, and this was one of the, first of all, he answered, when she arrived at his place, he answered the door wearing silk pajamas, which immediately made me want to vom. But she also, like, she talked about, she said, like, I believe there was penetration, but like it was small, so I'm not entirely sure, or something. Like there was like a
I wasn't sure if it was in, like,
I know there was.
Now I don't know if that was what she said on the stand or whether that was an old quote, but I did read that in an article about the trial. Like I wasn't sure if it was in. It's like, do we need to have that in the public record? I don't know.
I know. I mean, for our fun, I'm okay with it, because none of this is fun, and I can't believe it's fucking happening. But if I get a little detail like that, I'll have a little chuckle.
You can't help but just imagine this just sort of wet circus peanut.
God, Christian, my God. Why, Christian? Why? Well, I mean, so I don't know, like where, again, they heard from the Inquirer guy, they've heard from, Stormy Daniels, they've heard from other people, executive assistants and whatnot that helped kind of coordinate the thing. I mean, it feels like the prosecution is doing like a really thorough job of painting the picture of like what happened, how it happened, and how information was trying to be suppressed in the interest of, winning an election, and which is really what's at stake here. Not that, again, him having sex with her is not the problem. It's the suppression of that information as it related to the campaign. So I don't know. How do you feel like it's going?
I don't know. I mean, when it comes right down to it, it's just, is there one guy or one woman on the jury who they can, who's just either a stealth, Trumpy or just a sort of obstinate, the kind of person who wants to go against the crowd in general. There are those certain people who, like, comedians are primarily these people. I think George Carlin said the comedians are the people when the consensus is building who are like, hey, but wait a second, and you could have a couple of those people who just feel like this guy's being railroaded, and or who knows. I think in terms of the actual facts of the case, a guy already went to jail for this. The guy who was doing the payments for the guy was convicted and sent to jail. So to me, I don't really understand why it's a super vague case. I mean, you can, if you believe that Michael Cohen should have been convicted and sent to prison, then to me, you have to believe Trump should be convicted.
Yeah, it feels like at this point, right? It just feels like we're just going through the motions to get to the point that's obvious, like that, because we already put a guy. I mean, exactly. So some part of this, when I don't pay attention to it, my podcaster self feels a little bad because I'm like, oh, I should pay attention just in case something for the podcast, But then I also am like, but it's just fucking obvious. Like,
and it's also like the sort of ins and outs. It's kind of like that missing plane coverage. I had MSNBC on all day yesterday, and it was just literally a scroll of like, then this question was asked, and then this question was asked. And it was kind of like, is any of this really news? Like, I could probably wait till 10 p.m. and just get the 3-minute update. Yeah.
All right, folks, you let me know. I do want to mention one little quick thing, because last week I talked about the Climate Corps announcements, and people really liked that. A bit of good news. Again, the White House does very many things wrong, but my position is that government does a million things, and we can hold in our brains two positions. One is we disagree with some of their positions, especially with respect to foreign policy. We're maybe even disgusted by some of those positions. And we can also say, look at a public works program or whatever and think that that's really good, because the government is vast and it just does so much. So one of the things that Biden is announcing today is a $3.3 billion AI center in Wisconsin. A touch of pandering to that particular voter base that might appreciate the jobs in the form of votes. But that said, it is, these are significant. I mean, this is now like the second in 3 weeks or whatever that I'm talking about job creation through this president. These are significant public works. And I just think it's great. And I just want to say that, while also recognizing the White House has done a lot of things we may completely dislike. All right. Let us move on.
I can't believe you're such a Biden shill.
I know. I mean, you should have heard Greg Proops on this show. Greg Proops, first of all, showed up wearing a Biden Harris sweatshirt.
I know.
And then he said a ton of just really positive things, including, but not limited to, that he just was like, Biden's going to win. There's no question about it. And everyone lost their minds, because what a scary thought to be that, to be that positive. But again, I'm just holding different realities in my head. Please don't come at me. All right. Let's move on to the next topic. We read a piece let's move on to the next topic. Topic number 3. We read a piece in The Guardian about radical honesty by Radhika Sangani. And when I read the term radical honesty, a chill immediately went through my entire body, because I kind of feel like I don't ever want anyone to be radically honest with me. Before we get into how this writer did it and how it plays out, just what did you think just when you saw that headline, Christian, radical honesty?
My initial reaction seeing the headline was I gave myself a migraine rolling my eyes so hard. But because generally speaking, I find people who make this statement, and I've heard it before, they're basically saying, I've given myself a be an asshole for free card. I have allowed myself to be a dick. And it's so freeing to me. And, so much of the social contract of just personal interaction, being a person and living in a society, as George Costanza would say, is about lying on some level.
So much of it.
Yeah, it's like what you call lying, I call being a rational, polite adult. And so I do find sometimes that people use it as a get out of jail free card, like, oh, I'm just super honest. It's like, no, nobody asked your opinion. You offered an anger, and you get a lot of this obviously from faceless people on social media who never have their own faces and names attached to their accounts. I'm just super honest. No, you're just a dick and you're trying to start shit. When I read the article itself, it seemed a little bit kind of back-patty, like, look at me. What she's describing is called becoming an adult, is growing up.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, okay, so let me read a little bit from the piece. She wrote that basically she used to always tell a lot of innocuous little lies to protect people's feelings. And then one day she went to a therapy session and, quote, that's when I realized that all of this was actually people-pleasing behavior. And it turned out I was a prolific liar. Not only that, but according to my therapist, by constantly hiding my true feelings to protect those I loved, I was blocking them from ever getting to know the real me and creating true intimacy. And then this is where she kind of makes the shift. Slowly, I realized that every time I pretended I loved that thing my partner did, or lied about how fun it would be to go away for a friend's birthday, or forced myself on yet another hen do, which this is a British person, I was lying. I was prioritizing everyone else over myself, and it meant that inside I was raging with resentment. Now, my personal feeling about this is, I think someone who thinks this much about themselves and prioritizing themselves instead of, I actually am like, I think prioritizing others is actually like really quite lovely. Like, I personally feel that way. And maybe that's the people pleaser in me or whatever. And I probably have all these fucking things that therapists would tell me not to do. But I want, sometimes this is the exact thing that I sometimes wonder, is this why we're all unhappy? Because everyone's so self-focused instead of focused on the other and what actually would make them happy and would please them. I know that's a horrible word, but still, I don't know. Christian, what do you think?
No, I 100% agree. And obviously it's about finding a happy medium. And I agree with what she's saying in the sense that if you're not being honest about how you feel about things, then people aren't necessarily getting to know you. Although maybe they're getting to know you in the sense that, oh, she's the kind of person who will say that she wants to do things she doesn't actually want to do. I mean, that is a personality trait. But, this is just part of it is just getting older and growing up and realizing that it's just, you know what, I'm going to save us both a lot of time by not bullshitting my way through this. It's like, I don't have time to meet for coffee, or I don't, I'm not going to come to that party, or, or whatever. All the little things that we find ourselves guilted into. As you get older, you start to understand, like, oh, I'm just going to cut to the chase and say no. That's just kind of part of, entering your 40s. I think.
I think there's like a kind of civil efficiency that sets in, especially when your life gets really complicated and you're a professional, you get invited to a lot of things, you've got kids, I mean, it's like, it is funny because it's like, I feel like I entered an era where there's a lot of events. Like I'm already a comedian. My fucking life is all around people, providing an event for people. And now I feel like there's all these fucking events, and I get it. It's like, can be exhausting, but the big thing that I wrote in my notes, it just which you said previously, is middle ground. I was like, there's a middle ground. I wrote it in all caps. Like, we don't have to be radically honest where we put ourselves ahead of everybody. Like, we can strike a middle ground that's about efficiency, which sounds like she's talking a lot about. Like, I don't want to go to that thing. I don't feel like going to that thing. Like, how can I efficiently say no? What I mean?
And why would I create myself because it's something I struggle with now, but I'm better now than I was 15, 20 years ago. But it's like, and so much of that is ego as well. It's like, well, if I don't if I say I don't want to go to this party or meet up for drinks with this person, they're going to think something bad about me, and they're going to tell other people that about me. And so I guess I should go, it's all about me. It has nothing to do with them, And so there is just a thoughtfulness in being direct and honest. I mean, I do agree with that, but not everything has to be this massive epiphany. You haven't had a breakthrough.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just growing up.
All right, folks, check out the piece. Let me know what you think. Are you going to try radical honesty, or did you have a weirdly negative reaction to it the way I did? I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. That, my friends, is the end of the show. My God, I knew we'd be able to do it, Christian. Just this panel of one.
Just the two of us.
We can make it if we try.
Just the two. Feel like we're in a supermarket.
So, Christian Finnegan,
yes.
I would love for the people of Fake the Nation to be able to find you. Where do they do that?
I will be at Wicks and Sticks in the mall later today. It's a candle store. No, I am still technically on the zombie litter box known as Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, at Christ Finnegan. But I have a website which may or may not be functional right now. But no, I'm the worst self-promoter in the world. I don't know if you picked up on that. I do have 5 albums on iTunes and 3 specials, and I have this newsletter that I love called New Music for Olds. And just to let you know, it's not about finding out what the new music is. It's just about celebrating the fact that there's an endless buffet of new stuff. It's about making sure that music and absorbing and consuming new music remains a part of your life after most of us kind of leave that behind, that it makes your life better.
Which I love, and it's so interesting. And also, one of the things you inspired me to do, because you were on our New Year's episode, was to sing. We talked about me singing more, and you talked about being in a choir, and I've now told, like, any person that will listen to me that you're a part of a choir. Like, it comes up a lot. Anyway,
I'm on a hiatus now, but yes, I am still technically part of the hiatus. Yeah.
but and I was just like, and so, like, I'll sing more and stuff like that, because there's a feeling that I had as a youth about singing and music and new music and discovering things, and I love that feeling of, like, I discovered something, and it
gives your life a new car smell for a week.
Man, it really fucking does. I really love it. So anyway, subscribe, you guys, and then you know where to find me and all the things that I do. I will be in Chicago next Thursday for Wait, Don't Tell Me. If you happen to be in town, you want to get tickets. The live show is always super duper fun. And I'm going to be announcing other dates. I'm going to do a little tour in the summer. So I'll have more dates to announce soon. And otherwise, I want to thank everybody who makes the show a possibility. That's our wonderful producer, Andrew McGuire. Everyone at Headgum that makes the show a possibility. Thanks so much to Gaby Alter for writing our theme music. And if you have any questions or concerns or ideas, you can email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. And otherwise, we'll be back in your earballs next week.
That was a Headgum podcast.